She lived a life so quiet that most people never noticed her. Every morning she woke before the sun, not because she had to, but because sleep never stayed long. The room she lived in was small and plain. A narrow bed, a wooden chair, a small table near the window. Nothing on the walls except a faded clock that ticked louder at night. She kept the place clean, not out of pride, but habit. Order made her feel safe. She moved through her days like a shadow. She spoke only when needed and never raised her voice. When people looked at her, they saw a simple woman with tired eyes and worn clothes. They saw someone who blended into the background. No one asked questions. No one wondered where she came from or what she had been before, and she made sure it stayed that way. Her hands were the only thing that felt out of place. They were strong but gentle, with long fingers and careful movements. Even when she did small tasks, there was a kind of control in the way she moved, like someone who had once practiced something again and again until it became part of the body. Sometimes people noticed her hands, but they never thought much about it. They assumed hard work had shaped them. She worked wherever she could find something simple to do. Cleaning rooms, arranging chairs, helping quietly in places where no one asked personal questions. She preferred places filled with noise because noise hid thoughts. Silence brought memories, and memories were heavy. There was one place she avoided more than any other, though she never said why. Any place where music lived made her chest tighten. Even hearing a piano through a wall made her stop walking for a moment. Her breath would slow. Her eyes would close without her meaning to. Then she would move on quickly, as if running from something that might reach out and pull her back. Most evenings, she walked the long way home. The streets were busy, full of people heading somewhere important. She liked watching them. Their lives moved forward while hers stayed still. She did not envy them. She simply observed, like someone watching a river without stepping in. There was a small community building near where she lived. It hosted many activities, lessons, and meetings. Music sometimes came from its open windows. Laughter too. She had passed it many times without stopping. But one evening, rain forced her inside to wait it out. She stood near the door, careful not to draw attention, listening to the sounds around her. Inside, a group of people talked loudly. Some practiced music. Others argued about schedules. A piano sat in the corner of the room, old but well cared for. Its surface caught the light in a way that felt familiar, almost painful. She kept her eyes away from it and focused on the floor. Someone asked her if she was there to learn. The question was casual, almost careless. She shook her head gently and said she was only waiting for the rain to stop. Her voice was calm and low. The person nodded and walked away without another thought. As she stood there, memories pressed against her mind. Bright lights, large halls, the sound of applause so loud it felt like waves crashing. Travel, movement, endless practice, endless expectations. The feeling of being watched by thousands of eyes at once. She pushed those thoughts down the way she always did. That life was over. She had made sure of it. When the rain slowed, she left quickly. She did not look back. That night, sleep did not come at all. Her hands rested on her chest, fingers moving slightly as if playing invisible keys. When she realized what she was doing, she stopped and pressed her palms together until the feeling passed. Days later, she returned to the same building for work. They needed help setting up chairs and cleaning rooms before classes. She agreed without thinking. It was close and the work was simple. She told herself she would keep her distance from the music rooms. At first, everything went smoothly. She worked early before most people arrived. She kept her head down and finished tasks quickly. But as the days passed, more people noticed her. Not because she stood out, but because she was always there, always reliable. Some teachers spoke to her with a tone that carried quiet judgment. They saw her silence as weakness. They assumed she lacked education, talent, ambition. She did not correct them. She had learned long ago that explaining herself only brought more questions. One afternoon, a class ran late. The sound of a piano filled the hallway while she cleaned nearby. She tried to focus on her work, but the music was uneven. Mistakes were repeated. Notes fell flat. Her body reacted before her mind could stop it. She paused, listening. Her fingers twitched. Her shoulders tightened. She swallowed and forced herself to move again. But the sound followed her. Each wrong note felt like a small cut. Not because of pride, but because music had once been her language, and hearing it broken stirred something deep inside her. A teacher noticed her standing still and asked why she had stopped. The question was sharp, impatient. She apologized softly and said nothing else. The teacher shook their head and muttered something about people who lingered without purpose. She finished her work and left early that day. Her heart felt heavy, like she had carried something fragile too long. She told herself she would not return. There were other places to work, other quiet corners to hide in. But life has a way of pushing people toward the very things they are running from. The next morning, she returned anyway. She told herself it was only for the money, only for a short time. She would stay invisible just as she always had. She did not know that eyes were beginning to notice more than her silence. She did not know that her calm way of listening, her careful movements, and her quiet presence were slowly drawing attention. She believed her past was buried deep enough to stay hidden. She was wrong. And as she stepped into the building once more, the piano waited silently in the corner, as if it remembered her even when the world did not. She tried to keep her routine the same, hoping nothing would change. She arrived early, cleaned quietly, and stayed out of the way. The building slowly filled with voices, footsteps, and music. She moved between rooms like she was invisible. That was how she liked it. But people had started to notice her more than before. Not because she talked or demanded attention, but because she listened. When teachers complained about schedules or broken equipment, she heard everything. When students practiced and failed, she paused near the doors longer than necessary. It was not curiosity. It was habit. One morning, a teacher asked her to help move a bench inside the music room. The request was sharp, not polite. She nodded and followed, keeping her eyes low. The room smelled of polished wood and old books. The piano stood in the center, silent and heavy, like it was holding its breath. She placed the bench where she was told and turned to leave. But before she could step out, the teacher spoke again. The tone carried impatience, mixed with something close to mockery. They asked if she knew how to play at all. The question froze her. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, the room felt too small. She shook her head slowly and said no. The word came out softer than she wanted. The teacher laughed lightly and said that anyone could press a few keys. They suggested she try, almost like it was a joke. She stepped back and said she needed to finish her work. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands trembled. She kept them hidden behind her back. The teacher waved her off, clearly amused, and turned back to their lesson. That should have been the end of it. But later that day, during a break, another teacher pointed her out to a group and said she always looked lost near the music rooms. Someone joked that maybe she was afraid of the piano. Laughter followed. It was not loud, but it was enough. She felt the heat rise in her face. Not from anger, but from something older. Shame mixed with memory. She reminded herself why she was here. This life was small on purpose. This life was safe. The next few days were worse. Requests turned into commands. She was asked to sit closer during lessons, to hold books, to turn pages. Each time she obeyed quietly. Each time the sound of the piano cut deeper. Wrong notes, rushed tempo, careless hands. Her body reacted without permission. Once, she corrected a book that was placed upside down. She did it without thinking. The teacher noticed and raised an eyebrow. They asked how she knew where the page was. She answered simply that she could read music a little. The room went quiet for a second. Then someone laughed and said reading was not the same as playing. She nodded. She did not argue. But from that moment on, the attention changed. It sharpened. One afternoon, a lesson ran late again. A student struggled with a simple piece and grew frustrated. The teacher sighed loudly and said even someone off the street could play it better. Then they looked directly at her. They told her to sit. Her heart started beating so fast she thought others might hear it. She shook her head gently and said she was not a student. The teacher insisted. The tone was firm, almost challenging. A few people turned to watch. She felt trapped. Saying no felt harder than sitting down. Slowly, she moved to the bench. The piano keys stretched out in front of her like an old road she had sworn never to walk again. She placed her hands on her lap, not on the keys. The teacher repeated the instruction, this time with irritation. They said it was just a simple exercise. Nothing special. Just play. Her fingers hovered over the keys, shaking slightly. Her breath came shallow. Images flooded her mind. Crowded halls. Bright lights. Long nights of practice until her hands ached. A moment of silence before applause exploded like thunder. And then the fall. The loss. The reason she walked away from it all. She pulled her hands back and stood up. She said she could not do it. Her voice cracked just enough to reveal something real. The teacher scoffed and said she was being dramatic. They said fear was common in beginners. They told her to stop wasting time. That was when something inside her shifted. Not anger. Not pride. Just exhaustion. She sat down again. Slowly. This time, she placed her fingers on the keys. The room grew quiet, not because anyone expected much, but because they were curious to see her fail. She did not start playing. She closed her eyes instead. She breathed in once, then again. She reminded herself she was not on a stage. No lights, no crowd, just a room, just sound. Her fingers moved, but only enough to test the keys. Soft notes, careful pressure. The teacher frowned, already bored. Someone whispered. Then she stopped. She stood up abruptly and apologized. She said she could not continue and that she needed to return to work. Without waiting for permission, she left the room. Behind her, confusion followed. Some laughed. Others were silent. That night, she did not sleep at all. Her hands ached like they used to long ago. Not from playing, but from resisting it. She sat on the edge of her bed until morning, staring at the wall, replaying the moment over and over. She told herself she had almost made a mistake. She told herself she was still in control. But something had been stirred. The next day, the teachers spoke about her again. This time, their words carried irritation instead of humor. They said she was strange, that she wasted time, that she acted like she was hiding something. They were right. And as she returned to the building, heart heavy and steps slow, she felt it clearly for the first time. Sooner or later, they would not let her hide anymore. After that day, nothing felt the same. She could sense the shift the moment she walked into the building. Conversations stopped when she passed. Eyes followed her longer than before. It was not loud or open, but it was there, sitting heavy in the air. People were curious now, and curiosity can be cruel. She focused on her work more than ever. She arrived earlier, left later, and avoided the music rooms whenever she could. Still, sound has a way of traveling. Notes slipped through doors and walls, finding her no matter where she stood. Sometimes she caught herself correcting the rhythm in her head or predicting the next mistake before it happened. When she realized what she was doing, she would stop and press her fingers into her palms. At night, memories no longer stayed buried. They came without warning. She would be washing her hands and suddenly remember how they once trembled before walking onto a massive stage. She would hear distant traffic and it would turn into applause in her mind. The past, which she had locked away for years, was slowly breaking free. She remembered how it all started. A small room, an old piano, long hours alone. Music was never a dream at first. It was just something that made sense when nothing else did. While others spoke easily, she spoke through sound. Every note felt honest. Every piece felt like a conversation she could finally finish. That quiet skill did not stay hidden for long. People noticed. Opportunities followed. Teachers pushed her harder than she thought possible. She traveled from one place to another, learning, performing, improving. Her life became measured in practice hours and performance nights. The world praised her discipline and control, but few saw the pressure behind it. Grand halls became familiar. So did expectations. She was no longer just a person. She became a standard others measured themselves against. Mistakes were not allowed. Weakness was not discussed. She learned to smile through exhaustion and bow through pain. Then came the moment everything broke. It was not a single failure but a slow collapse. Loss came quietly at first. Someone she trusted disappeared from her life without warning. Promises were broken. Support turned into silence. The music, once her refuge, became heavy with reminders of what she had lost. One night, after a performance that should have been celebrated, she sat alone and felt nothing. No relief, no joy, just emptiness. That frightened her more than any mistake ever had. So she walked away. No farewell, no explanation. She disappeared from the world that once knew her name. At first people searched. Rumors spread. Some said she was ill. Others said she had lost her skill. Eventually the world moved on as it always does. She built a smaller life from the pieces left behind. A life with fewer eyes and fewer expectations. A life where she could breathe. Until now, back in the present, the teachers grew impatient. They did not like what they could not understand. Her silence, her refusal, her careful distance from the piano. It irritated them. One afternoon, a teacher confronted her directly. They asked why she worked there if she hated music so much. She answered honestly but not fully. She said she did not hate music. She just did not belong near it anymore. The answer only confused them more. Later that day, she overheard a conversation she was not meant to hear. Two teachers stood near the hallway, speaking in low voices. They wondered aloud if she was pretending, if she thought acting mysterious made her interesting. One of them suggested putting her on the spot again, forcing her to play properly this time. Her chest tightened as she listened. She stepped away quietly before they noticed her. Fear crawled up her spine, but beneath it was something else. A tired kind of acceptance. She knew this moment had been coming. That evening, she returned to her room and opened a small box she kept hidden under her bed. Inside were things she rarely touched. Old papers, travel tags, a worn photograph taken on a stage so large it looked unreal now. She stared at it for a long time. The person in the picture looked confident, alive, strong. She barely recognized herself. Her hands shook as she closed the box. She understood then that she could not keep living between two worlds. Hiding was becoming harder than facing the truth. The next day, the pressure reached its peak. A class gathered in the music room. The piano stood waiting. The teacher looked at her and told her to sit down again. This time there was no laughter, no jokes, only expectation. She looked around the room. Faces filled with doubt, curiosity, impatience. None of them truly saw her yet. She sat. Her fingers rested on the keys, steady now. The fear was still there, but it had changed. It no longer felt like something chasing her. It felt like something she had carried for too long. She began to play. Not the full truth. Not yet. Just enough to let the room know they had been wrong about her. And as the first notes filled the air, something deep inside her finally woke up. The first notes came out soft, almost unsure. Not because she lacked skill, but because she was testing herself. The room stayed quiet. No one spoke. A few people exchanged looks, already judging. They expected mistakes. They expected proof that she did not belong there. She kept her eyes on the keys. The piano felt both familiar and distant, like meeting someone you once loved after many years apart. Her fingers moved slowly at first, careful not to wake everything at once. The sound filled the room gently, steady, and clean. The teacher crossed their arms, unimpressed. Someone near the back shifted in their seat. The piece sounded simple, ordinary. Then something changed. Her hands relaxed. Her shoulders dropped. The tension she had carried for so long began to loosen. The notes grew deeper, richer. Each one landed exactly where it should. Not rushed, not delayed. The piano responded to her touch like it had been waiting. People stopped moving. A student leaned forward without realizing it. The teacher's expression shifted from boredom to confusion. This was not beginner playing. This was not luck. She moved into the next part of the piece without hesitation. The rhythm flowed naturally, like breathing. Her fingers danced across the keys with control and grace. There was no effort in her face, only focus. The sound filled the room completely now, pushing everything else aside. Someone whispered, but the sound quickly died. No one wanted to break the moment. She was no longer playing for them. She was playing because the music demanded it. Memories rose as she played, but they did not hurt this time. They guided her. Long nights of practice returned, not as pressure, but as strength. Every lesson, every correction, every sacrifice lived in her hands. The teacher stepped closer to the piano, eyes fixed on her fingers. They had seen many skilled players, but this was different. This was not just technique. It was understanding. She reached a section that required absolute control. One wrong move would break the entire flow. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence. The notes came out clear and powerful, yet soft enough to feel personal. It sounded like a story being told without words. Some people felt their throats tighten. Others felt their eyes sting without knowing why. The room was no longer just a classroom. It had become something else entirely. As she continued, a few teachers began to recognize the style, the phrasing, the timing, the way she held certain notes just long enough to make them ache. It was familiar, uncomfortably familiar. One teacher whispered a name under their breath, then stopped themselves. That person had disappeared years ago. This woman could not be her. But doubt had entered their minds. She played through the final passage without rushing. She let the last note hang in the air until it faded naturally. When it was gone, she lifted her hands and rested them on her lap. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind. The heavy kind that comes when people do not know what to say. Finally, someone clapped. It was slow at first, unsure. Then another joined. Then another. Soon the room filled with applause that felt almost desperate, like people were trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. She did not stand. She did not bow. She simply nodded once and stood up from the bench. The teacher who had pressured her earlier opened their mouth to speak, then closed it again. Their face showed something close to disbelief. They asked where she had learned to play like that. She answered honestly but simply. She said she had played for a long time ago. That answer only raised more questions. Another teacher stepped forward and asked if she had studied professionally. The room grew quiet again, waiting. She hesitated. Then she nodded. That single movement changed everything. The tone of the room shifted. Respect replaced doubt. Curiosity replaced judgment. People looked at her differently now, like they were seeing her for the first time. Someone asked if she had ever performed publicly. She did not answer right away. Her eyes moved across the room, then back to the piano. Finally, she said yes. A teacher laughed nervously and said they would have remembered someone like her. She met their eyes calmly and said, "Not everyone remembers what they take for granted." The words landed harder than she intended. Silence returned. No one pushed her after that. No one ordered her to play again. They let her leave the room without another word. Later that day, the teachers gathered quietly among themselves. Old recordings were mentioned. Forgotten performances. A career that ended without explanation. Pieces of a puzzle began to line up. By the time she finished her work and headed toward the door, whispers followed her steps. She felt lighter than she had in years. Not because the truth was fully out, but because she had finally stopped running from it. As she stepped outside, the sound of the piano still echoed in her ears. For the first time in a long time, it did not hurt. The days that followed felt different, even though nothing on the surface had changed. The building still opened at the same hour. The halls still filled with sound. But the way people looked at her had shifted. There was care now. Distance too. Respect mixed with uncertainty. No one ordered her around anymore. Requests came softly, often followed by a thank you. Teachers spoke to her like she mattered. Some avoided her eyes, unsure of what to say after everything that had happened. Others watched her quietly, as if waiting for her to explain herself. She did not. She continued her work the same way she always had. Cleaning, setting up rooms, leaving before conversations turned personal. She had shared enough. One afternoon, a teacher approached her with a careful smile. They apologized for how she had been treated. The words were awkward but sincere. She listened without interrupting and nodded when they finished. She said she understood. And she meant it. Understanding did not mean forgetting. It meant letting go. Later that week, a small gathering was planned. Nothing public. Nothing formal. Just a quiet request. Would she play again? Not to prove anything. Not to impress. Just to share. She thought about it all night. She remembered the life she had left behind. The noise. The pressure. The way music had once stopped being joy and turned into weight. She also remembered the silence that followed when she walked away. How empty it felt at first. How peaceful it became later. In the end, she agreed. The room was smaller this time. Only a few chairs. No whispers. No expectations. The piano waited patiently, like an old friend who did not ask questions. She sat down slowly. Her hands rested on the keys, steady and calm. She did not close her eyes this time. She looked forward, breathing evenly. She played. The music flowed without effort. Not dramatic. Not showy. Just honest. Every note carried balance. Control and freedom moving together. The room filled with warmth instead of tension. Those listening felt it immediately. This was not a performance meant to amaze. It was a conversation. A story told by someone who had lived it fully. When she finished, there was no loud applause. Only quiet appreciation. That was enough. After that day, she was no longer asked to hide her ability. But she was also not pushed into the spotlight. People respected her boundaries. They let her choose. Some asked questions about her past. She answered a few gently and briefly. She did not speak about fame. She did not list achievements. She spoke instead about lessons, discipline, and the cost of carrying dreams too early for too long. The teachers listened. They learned. She began helping students who struggled, but only when asked. She showed them how to listen, not just play. How to feel the space between notes. How to forgive mistakes and move forward. The students trusted her. They did not see a legend. They saw someone real. And that mattered more. One evening, after everyone had left, she stayed behind alone. The building was quiet. The piano sat in the corner, reflecting the soft light. She played once more. This time it was just for herself. The music was slower, thoughtful, carried memories without pain, joy without fear. When the last note faded, she smiled softly, something she had not done in a long time. She stood up, turned off the lights, and walked out into the night. Her life did not suddenly become grand again. There were no headlines, no tours, no return to the world that once praised her. And she did not want that. What she found instead was balance. Music was part of her life again, but it no longer owned her. It walked beside her, not ahead of her. The teachers who once judged her never forgot the lesson she taught without meaning to. They learned to look beyond appearances, to listen before deciding, to remember that people carry stories deeper than what is seen. As for her, she continued living simply. She still woke before the sun, still cleaned small rooms, still spoke softly, but she no longer felt invisible. She had reclaimed something important. Not fame, not applause, herself. And that was more than enough.